Welcome to the Growth Focus Podcast. I'm Gary Lafferty, your host and founder of Growth Focus Partnerships, where we work with MSP owners and B2B tech companies to fix the revenue gaps that are quietly costing them growth. Today's guest is Michael Baer, Fractional CMO at Tech CXO, and he brings together nearly 4 decades of marketing experience working with everyone from pre-revenue startups through to public companies. What that span teaches you and what this conversation gets into is that most growth problems aren't actually growth problems. They're foundation problems. Companies that are busy, active, execution, but doing it without a real story, without positioning that means anything to the customer, and without a clear answer to the most basic question in business. What do you actually do for me? If your pipeline is inconsistent, if you sound like everybody else in your market, if your sales team and your marketing aren't pulling in the same direction, then this conversation is going to give you that framework to start fixing that. Michael's sharp, he's direct, and not interested in theory for the sake of it. This is going to be practical stuff. So as per usual, no fluff. Let's get into it. Michael, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here today. For anyone watching, why don't you just start off with telling us who you are and what is it that you actually do?
Thanks, Gary. It's great to be here. Appreciate being on the other side of the podcast from you. My name's Michael Baer. I'm a fractional chief marketing officer and marketing consultant. I work for a company called Tech CXO, which is a full C-suite fractional consulting company. And I have nearly 40 years of marketing experience. I've always been a marketer. I fell in love with marketing, I think, in my in my youth, watching jingles on television and memorizing advertising slogans. But as a fractional CMO, I work with leadership teams, often early stage and growth companies, often brought in by founders or investors or boards, and I help really drive strategy, go-to-market planning, create customer-led brands, align marketing with goals and sales, and drive pipeline and drive growth. The typical ICP tends to be a company, I like to say, has gotten somewhere, but knows that doing the same thing in the same way will not get them to 2x or 5x or 10x. And they know they need to begin to professionalize, make repeatable, make more programmatic things like how they talk about themselves, how they go to market, identifying strategic directions and foundations that build, like I said, more repeatable, predictable growth.
I think this is the key thing, Mark. Listen, it's repeatable and predictable, because depending on where you are in your business, there's going to be people who are listening to this and people who are watching this and say, I'm so busy on the growth, but they don't necessarily have that strategy for continuous growth. Sometimes it's a feast and famine, which we hear a lot about in this particular industry. And you've worked across, obviously, a whole range of companies, pre-revenue startups up to public companies within your career. What did those extremes teach you about what actually drives growth in companies today?
It's interesting. I have this term I call Stratocution, which is naturally the fact that I'm joining strategy and execution. It means that those two things can go together. But through my career, I've seen it go wrong from both sides of the equation. And so I think learning from both of those, one is sometimes large companies believe we've got a strategy and then they don't execute in ways that follow suit the strategy. It's almost as if we build a strategy, we write it down, we feel really good about it, and we put it on our bulletin board. And then we just start doing things like as if they're discrete things, strategy and execution. And then the flip side I see so often with early stage growth companies again that are doing a lot of stuff, often they really don't take the time to create this foundational strategy. So they start doing stuff which feels good because it's active, it's action oriented. And so so the doers think we're making progress, and often they will get some success, either founder-led sales, initial contacts, pilots that turn into things. But then they'll continue to do that execution without putting those fundamentals in place. We talked about programmatic or repeatable. To me, the only way to get to that is to develop those foundational strategic inputs. Nothing surprising or new here, but like, who is your customer and what do they need? What is your positioning? What is your actual value proposition? How does a customer, shop or work their way through a sales cycle? How do they make decisions? These are the things that, I believe the intentionality of literally formalizing it, putting it down, and building those inputs to your plan make the huge difference. So I have worked with companies that create the foundation, but don't then follow that through into the actual doing. But to me, that's like, it probably sounds like stupid, obvious, or simple. Like, have a strategy, but you'd be blown away, and you probably know it well by all the conversations and the experience you have. But you'd be blown away, I always say, about how many companies are doing work without formalizing how to think about the work, how to intentionally plan for that work, and how to build the right proper foundation for it, so that it begins to stick and build off each other and build momentum. When you're doing one-off activity, you may hit some singles or doubles along the way, but if you haven't if you haven't put it all together into a single plan, it doesn't cohere, it doesn't compound, it doesn't build off each other, it doesn't grow the momentum that you could.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We hear this all the time. Is there's projects to do, and they create the strategy for the project to be done, but actually
Right.
sewing it all together so it's actual flow that one leads to another, and also there's a knock-on effect of one moving to the other. But they're so focused on the actual just the strategy. It's interesting to hear what you were just saying there about sometimes we spend so much time creating the strategy and pat on the back, we're done. We've done
Yeah,
our
yeah.
job now, and
As
now
if
it's
we're
like, how do
done,
we,
right?
someone's forgot to press the go button and say, right, now we need to put this into place. But also you see from the very beginning, there's especially we see people maybe working towards their first seven figures or early seven figures, and they're very much product-led or service-led as opposed to strategy-led. They're so busy
Yep.
building what they're building that they don't, or they tend to forget there's a business out there, a company out there, an organization out there, which is a tremendous asset if they just gave it the strategy. What's your thoughts on that?
100%. 100%. I mean, so often, and I come across through the various networking and groups I'm in, I come across a lot of founders, very early stage founders building something pre-revenue, even pre-seed at times. And it's amazing how many I find will, and they're all passionate, brilliant people. No knock on that, but often they'll come forward and they come up with a product, and then what they'll find down the road, and sometimes years later, unfortunately, is that it's a product in search of a problem to solve. Um, you know, th- at the end of the day, so many companies, they're building stuff and they get so lost in what they're building that they forget that it's for somebody, and that somebody has a need, and that need does or doesn't need to be solved. So to me, the most critical aspect is to be very clear about the actual value you provide. Um, Too often companies are, even when there is a great opportunity to provide a value to a customer, they're so focused on what they do. And you see it all the time. I mean, you go to a website and says, we do this, we are this. And I always say, no one cares what you do. It's what you do for me, the customer. And so you have to be very clear on the problem / challenge / need that you're in service of, and then what you do, whether it's technology, service, anything, what it does to unblock, to enable, to add value to that customer's existence, life, needs, job, whatever it is. And that I think is one of the biggest things that I see. It's like a company, a product that turns into a company, or a product that turns into a
Yeah.
brand. If you haven't solved for that, it always becomes you're just a technology. And there's a lot of technologies out there, but if you are actually a solution, that that becomes a brandable proposition.
Yeah, it's easier to build your moat when you actually have a solution. Otherwise, we're hearing this all the time. You hear it, I hear it all the time, that it's harder to be heard out there. I sound exactly the same as everybody else.
Yep.
It's because you're product led. No, and it's the ugly baby syndrome, right? No one believes that their baby is ugly. But as you say, no one really cares.
Yeah.
What what can you do for me? And so that leads nicely into my next question, I suppose. You come across these founders and they come to you, Michael, and says, growth is kind of stuck, Michael. I've tried everything and we're not just getting that growth. What is the first thing you try and do to isolate the true problem there?
Almost always start with that exercise of, do you have a positioning or a value proposition? What is it that you do? What is your narrative, your story? And does it align with who your customer is? So it's, to me, it's like, first thing is customer understanding. Everybody says, I understand my customer, but it's likely they either don't or haven't really committed it to, these are the key things that we exist for. And then secondly, it's like, what is your positioning? I mean, there's lots of different words and phrases: positioning, value proposition. I actually like to say story. Like, in other words, what is your story? Why do you exist? What do you do? And for whom? Because having that makes all the other initiatives easier. So like there's lots of reasons to do it. One is because you should, and it's important, and knowing that. But the second thing is that it makes everything else easier. Everything from creating a product one sheet to what your website should say, to how your salespeople should talk to their customers, how you follow up an email. It helps frame that stuff, and it gives you like sort of the head start. It should all be towards this. We exist for these reasons. We do this for you. This helps you do X. So when you're writing content, I mean, I even find content marketing, like, I'm a big proponent of it on the one hand, but on the other hand, people are just writing or doing, or actually now using the robots to do it, the AI bots. If you don't know why you're writing, in other words, once you have that key story, then you know the topics you should write about and the position you should take on those topics and the level or the type of authority that you should have. It gives you a head start in anything you do. And I think, I work with, we've all worked with companies that, especially sort of the old school, old school meaning really newer school, but it's been a generation of execution eats strategy for breakfast, and good is the enemy of getting started, or move fast and break things. I just think mostly that's BS, because because it's giving people an out for doing a little hard work before you start doing stuff. In other words, if you do the hard work of strategic foundation building, all that doing and breaking stuff is going to be strategic and directionally right and lead you somewhere, versus let's just start doing things and then we'll course correct, or we'll iterate, or the algorithms online of this performance hack, growth hacking model will get us to the right place. It's like, would you get in your car and drive somewhere with that theory? Just start driving and you'll end up where you want to go, and you'll make the wrong turns? No, because it's wasteful. It wastes your time. It wastes your gas money. And frankly, the one thing that's more precious for early stage or growth companies than even budget is time and manpower and resource time. So like, if I could just get you to spend 2 weeks or if a handful of hours, a couple of work sessions to commit some of this to like a strategic fundamentals, then start hacking away, you'll be that much forward, in my opinion.
Well, I know. I think that's a very good point and insight to make there, Michael. And on the fact of, love the fact that you're being slightly controversial. That's what we love on this channel, is being controversial. So I'm going to continue that theme and gain your thoughts on that. Like you said, it's all about. I'm a great believer, just like you are, that once you have your story and your why, and people want to hear that, especially in the world of technology, we grow more and more in technology today with AI, like you said about the robots. We're authenticity is lacking a lot now, and we don't seem to have that authenticity. And we're hearing founders say, "Well, I'm finding it hard to stand out," because we go back to that product or service led. So I want to digest a little bit about what you said, because you gave some really great nuggets there for people who are listening and are watching. There is about, if you don't want to become that commodity, your authenticity comes from your story of who you actually are. And once you have that story, whether it's founder-led sales and founder-led marketing, which we'll talk about a little bit in a minute, but ultimately all your messaging becomes easier because you have that message in place. Now, here's my controversial bit. Since you were throwing out phrases as well, so I'm going, my mission statement. We keep hearing about this mission statement, which is obviously almost in the future, and it almost ignores where the owner, the founder comes from. Everything we do is towards this mission, as opposed to this is where we come from. This is our foundation. This is why we exist. This is why we set out to serve you. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think there's a bit of a nomenclature clash, meaning mission can mean a bunch of different things to people. To me, a mission is only powered by your history, your past, meaning I'm on a mission. I'm going somewhere, as you say, to the future, but it's because of what I believe, and my belief is my purpose. I think vision is another one that gets confusing, because vision is about the future. It's like, in 10 years, we want to be this. That's cool. I think that's BHAG is another word for it, big, hairy, audacious goal. But I think mission, I call it purpose, because it cuts out the nomenclature clash, meaning, what's your purpose? And I believe, and this is a little bone to pick. I mean, I think Simon Sinek is amazing, and I think his why speech, TED Talk, is fantastic. I was talking about whys a couple of years before that, and so I'm frustrated that I didn't do the TED Talk. But I think it's incredibly powerful, because anybody, theoretically, any company could make anything, or engineering company could engineer anything. Any product company could make a product, but they've, quote unquote, chosen to do that. So there's got to be a why, or I shouldn't say there's got to be. I mean, it could be, I bought a company that makes widgets and now we make widgets. Understood. But I think if you dig into that story better, you will see that there is a powerful why, or purpose, that gives impetus or momentum to your overall story. I'll give you an example. I was working with a company, a small growth company that has actually had a couple of service lines. One was in the physician practice management, helping companies. I mean, think about physicians, doctors. They spend decades learning how to, be people of science and help patients, and that's the work they do. Then they start a practice, and my God, I'm spending 2/3 of my time in administration and paperwork and insurance claims and credentialing doctors. So they need help. And so, but this company did this work, and in doing just a little bit of digging, we recognized a couple things. One is just the healthcare crisis and the lack of access to doctors, and doctors being burdened by all this administrative bloat. And so helping them do that, there's a purpose there. And then even digging further, it was like, well, we really help more private practices. And so if you study the category, you see there's been, a dramatic decrease in doctors in private practice. They're selling out to private equity, selling out to hospital groups, becoming part of more the systems. And so private practices are declining. They still represent close to 50% in, say, primary care. But point being, we think about like America and our primary care doctor, our family physician. These were like the people we trusted, and they were part of a community. And this idea of a private practice has other kind of values to it. And so starting to think about purpose, like we believe that community, so we literally wrote this, we believe this purpose. It's like we believe that communities are made stronger by the access to health care in their communities. And so our purpose is to help those physicians and help those HCPs in order to let them thrive and help communities thrive. Like, wow, like you want to put your hand on your heart and say, and it's true. It really is true. And they believe it and they do. So it became this powerful idea that can be, it's not like you're going to make that your primary selling message. At the end of the day, the doctor's practice needs you to help them do X, Y, and Z. But having that powerful, and it also helped overarch this other part of the business that felt like kind of pinned together. Now it's like, oh yeah, this is our overarching, kind of purpose. So I say that as an example of like you scratch a little bit below it. They probably never would have thought that that was their purpose when they're just doing their job, but it existed. And by unleashing it, it becomes, again, it can be part of your story. It can be part of the founders when he or she is presenting to maybe raise capital or maybe talk to whatever it is. These are things that make that story, like you say, it goes from being just I'm a provider of solutions to we're on a mission. I think that
Yeah.
that
It
it's
also
just
make,
it
it's
gives
also
power.
calling to a higher good. Just listening to that story, which is what you just said. It's like a calling to a higher level. This is what we believe in. This is why we're doing what we're doing, because we want to help the healthcare and whatnot. So let's talk about positioning. How do you help company find its real uniqueness, its real, unique value proposition? Not the slide deck version which everybody has seen, but if you're walking into a company, you're talking to a founder, you're talking to the leaders. How do you actually help them define the your unique value proposition,
Mhm,
as
mhm,
opposed to
mhm.
this wishy-washy, we want to
Yep,
be different, but we're not?
right. Um, I mean, there are specific processes that I use. One is always includes interviews, in-depth interviews. So I like to do cust- cu- the company stakeholder interviews. Um, so whoever's key that would be helpful. Obviously, if it's a smaller company like founder or CEO, sometimes I work a lot in healthcare and health tech and that kind of thing. So a lot of times it's a clinician or a chief medical officer or something like that. Um, and and poking at that, particularly getting them to think about the customer, because I think a lot, we talked about this earlier. People within the company, especially founders and product builders, they sometimes lose a little bit of sight of the actual customer. So, like, what is it that gets them? What are the problems, and how do they shop that category? And then, if I can, get to customers themselves and really understand. Um, Challenges, its pain points. How do they think about the category? What are they looking to achieve? What are their goals? Um, and then trying to dissect. Sometimes there are value chains. So sometimes it's not as easy as just saying, like for example, the medical practice needs its doctors to be credentialed. So we provide like sometimes, okay, that's right. Yeah, there is a higher level so that they can help patients, so that there's patient outcomes. Healthcare always has these multiple layers where you're helping a doctor do something so they can get it, insurance reimbursement, but ultimately there's a patient at the end of it. So understanding those value chains. I was doing work with with a company in the event space. And we were just talking about, well, they help companies put on events. So they're working with event program managers on the client side, and they're doing things and they're building. So all that stuff is what they do. But then at the end of the day, there's an event. And guess what? There are different people at that event, and that event needs to be great. And so the attendees of an event have a experience. So they're helping the attendee. Like that's a value. And then at the end of the day, really, when you think about events have are an investment for a company. So the company
Mm.
wants to achieve something. So at the really at the end of this whole value chain, a company needs to see some sort of ROI or impact from those events. And so, like thinking that through, where in this value chain are you enabling? Sometimes I like to ask that question. It's like, okay, having you as a solution, what does it enable that customer then to do? And if you stop with the tactical product benefit, that might be, I mean, in some cases, really, that is it. We help you do X, that one thing. Usually there's others doing exactly that, and it can become commoditized. Are there other parts of that value chain that you can demonstrate, you enable, you deliver, that's the value? That's often a really powerful way to get to something bigger and more purposeful. Um,
Yeah, that makes sense. It's just about breaking it down so that it's easier to see. It's easier to see what that value is once you've gone through that process. And I like what you said there. It's all about having some heavy interviews first and knowing exactly what what's agreeable, what's disagreeable, and work from there. Let's micro down a little bit. Let's talk about, you mentioned it earlier, founder-led sales, founder-led marketing. How important is it that you think, no matter, we're still seeing companies 5 million, 10 million, even 25 million, still with an element of founder-led sales.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're also seeing is, whereas founder-led marketing was extremely pertinent in the beginning, it's almost like they kick it to the curb as quickly as they possibly can so they can focus on their baby again. What are your thoughts on the importance of founder-led marketing, making sure that people understand who the founder is, why the founder is there, and what should they be doing about it?
You're not going to like the answer, because the answer is it depends. I think founder-led sales starts and happens less because that founder is, from a persona storytelling aspect, a powerful interest driver, closer, but more because that founder started it, knows the most, wants to be involved, is really control driven, and can't find anybody who's equally, strong. So in the first side being, there are times where a founder is uniquely qualified to drive interest and closing. And those times it is somebody who's got a real powerful story, like came from one place, discovered something, and in so discovering built a new idea that solved something. I think those can be powerful stories. Of course, you can also segue from that story, where a salesperson can, if that's important, if they find that it's, the history of where this idea and this company came from is really a powerful interest driver and motivator. You can tell. You don't need you don't need the founder to do that. But sometimes, again, in healthcare, there's particular key opinion leader type medicine or provider side physicians who, because of who they are, because of the work they've done, because of their specific knowledge, or in technology, I suppose it's the same thing, they are especially powerful at doing that selling. But honestly, it gets to a point, I think, where what you were alluding to, where it's just it's not scalable. I mean, if you're trying to have many conversations, that one person can't be in all the conversations. I think in early stages, to your point, when you don't need 1,000 leads, you need 10 good ones and close 3 of them, and that's like, wow, that's our first quarter. It's then it can work. And I also tend to think, this is a little, you say, contrarian or controversial. I think we make a little bit too much of founder stories, because everybody's got a story. So if everybody's story, I think you could make it more about a story about a company than it is about a founder at times. We believe something. We isn't the CEO or the founder. We is this company. The company believed we could make a better mousetrap, and so we did. It doesn't have to be, Mary Smith came from X, saw that this was missing, built this thing, and now we've got the better mousetrap. I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth a little bit, because that can be powerful. I just don't think it's as necessary. I mean, how many times do you talk to a founder who says, I had again, especially in healthcare, I had an uncle who got cancer and it made me want to solve, this problem for oncologists. It's like, yes, and, fine, but everybody has an experience with cancer, and everybody who invented something in this space. I don't know that that's necessary. Maybe it's just more, too many people across America are suffering from this. That's why. Does it need to be that my cousin was? I don't know. I don't know.
It's we don't need the linear, I started here, and this is my thought, and this is where we went to, and stuff like that. And and very much about you take someone like Richard Branson, for example. Everyone knows his story, but we never heard of a linear story. If you actually go and ask someone to plot his story, no one actually knows it. but
Right.
it's very much of the brand. This is what I saw wrong in the airline industry. That's why I fixed it. This is what I saw wrong in the record
Yeah.
industry. That's why I fixed it. And those kind
Yeah.
of
It's more
stories
that
can
I'm a
be
disruptor, so I'm disrupting. Yeah, exactly.
absolutely. Or better, I saw like you said, the mousetrap. The mousetrap was broken. This is how I've designed a better one as a designer
Right.
from that. And I think that's some really good points there. So we're moving into the end now, and I've got some quick fire questions for you, Michael. So they're literally as they come, just shout it out as
I
we
hope
go.
I
It's a bit
have
of
quick
fun.
fire answers for you.
Okay, so obviously you can think about the answer, but yeah, they're just quick fire answers. So the first one is this: what is one GTM metric you trust more than most people out there do?
One GTM metric I trust. It's probably converting interest into meetings. Meeting conversion. If you
Yeah.
can actually take somebody from downloaded something, opened something to, yeah, I'll meet with you. That's like, okay, we have the right story, we've got the right support, and now we've scratched their itch enough that they want to look under the hood.
Okay, next, the most expensive mistake you see founders repeat when defining their ICP.
They take calls from anywhere. So you create a target audience, and then you say, yeah, well, but we'll also be this other, in other words, being wishy-washy. I mean, strategy is designed, like the number one reason for strategy is to rule things out. Strategy is about sacrifice. This is what we believe, so we're going to continue in this direction. So constantly it's like, oh, but we could also do this, or oh, we could also do that, because you don't want to say no to anything. I think people think that by making it specific, you're losing chances, but truthfully, you're better at the chances you get because you're committed.
Sign the UVP is weak.
UVP.
Yeah, unique value proposition.
Oh, sorry. One sign is that it's about us, the company, not about the customer. That's probably the number one. And in fact, when you asked me before, how do I think about or how do I create positioning? It's always get your mind off your own product and your own company. What value do you offer?
Best question a CEO can ask to test whether sales and marketing are actually truly aligned.
The best test. Ask a salesperson what the positioning of the product is.
And finally, one principle you want listeners or viewers to steal and apply this week.
What's the biggest problem that you solve, and what does it enable your customer to do?
Yeah, well, Michael, I'm sure people are going to take much more than that. One last thing from you today, from everything that you've shared with us. If people want to get hold of you, talk to you, potentially work with you, what's the best way they can actually do that?
Link in with me, Michael Baer. And also you can send me an email at michael.baer@Tech CXO. So TECHCXO.com. Love to speak with anybody who's interested in bouncing these ideas around.
Well, I'll make sure, though, my team puts those links in the show notes, so it's easy for people to come and get you and get hold of you. That all that leads me to say is, Michael, thank you very much for your time today. Thank you for sharing your expertise and the insights. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us for yet another episode of the Growth Focus podcast. And as per usual, if you've liked what you've heard today from Michael, make sure you subscribe. But more importantly than subscribing, make sure you share this episode out with others so that other people can learn from leaders such as Michael and all the other great leaders that we've had on the show. So until next time, be great, work hard, but more importantly, be profitable, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
There's a lot in this conversation worth sitting with, but the thing that keeps coming back to me is what Michael calls stratocution, the gap between having a strategy and actually executing against it. And honestly, it cuts both ways. Large companies write the strategy, feel good about it, pin it to the wall, and then they just start doing things. Yet early stage companies, they skip the strategy entirely because doing feels like progress. But the result in both cases is the same. You're busy, you're active, but nothing compounds. Nothing builds off anything else. You hit singles here and there, but you're never building the momentum that actually changes the trajectory of the business. What Michael's really talking about, whether he's framing it as a positioning, whether it's story, whether it's value proposition or purpose, it's all the same thing. Do you actually know what you do for your customer? Not what you do, but what you do for them. Because until that's clear, your website's talking about you, salespeople, they're just winging it. Your content's going in 10 different directions and your pipeline reflects all of that. The other bit I thought was sharp, and this applies directly to anyone in the MSP or B2B tech space, was the ICP point. Strategy is about sacrifice. The moment you start saying, well, we could also go after this type of client, you're already diluting everything. Your messaging gets softer, your positioning gets blurrier, and suddenly you sound like everybody else in the market, which if you've been in this industry for more than 5 minutes, you know it's the default setting for most MSPs. Now, if any of that landed just a little bit too close to home, that's worth paying attention to. Because the revenue leak audit exists for exactly that moment. It's a free 30-minute call, no pitch, where we get into the actual mechanics of your business, where the leads are going, where they're going quiet, where's the follow-up breaking down, where's the messaging losing people before they even get to a conversation. You'll be surprised how often the issue isn't top of the funnel. It's what happens after the interest is already there. So as per usual, the link is in the show notes. Book it. It doesn't cost you anything. Send this to one person who needs to hear it. See you the next time.